It's a real quick one. I'm just about to jump on the table saw that I've got. I'm going to basically process down a load of wood initially, so it's already done. The other advantage is it takes up less volume, because obviously you got the spill where the saw's been, and it takes out material, so the actual volume of the wood I'm storing at home is reduced. And then the other thing is, because this is sort of semi-seasoned, I'm getting from the wood place near Wells. I'm just trying to encourage it to dry out in my airing cupboard. Now, I'm not cutting it down to the smallest possible size, because I'd like to keep everything in reasonable blocks to stop warpage in many ways. But a slight clue is what I'm trying to do the video for, on why I process what I do the way I do it. That's what I do. Now, if I had the tree and just put it through time after time after time after time after time, that's called flat sawing. So if you can imagine you had an automatic bandsaw, you put the log in and the bandsaw just passed backwards and forwards and just got lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. So it's basically doing flat boards, floorboards for houses. Okay, you're not really getting the advantage of the way that the grain of the wood and the medullary rays are orientated within the wood with the growth rings. So the wood that I get is sort of half cut for me. So I've done a little block here. I'll do a bigger one in the next couple of weeks, months or whatever, but if you have a look here, I've got a piece of cherry. Now, this piece of cherry I've drawn on with biro the way that the rings are going. Now what I'm going to end up doing is I'll do 2 passes, 1, 2, and I'll get those 2 off. Now that's pretty good quarter sawing. Okay, and then I'll put it up that way, so now I'm here, and I'll take the next 2, 1, 2 like that, and go that way to take advantage of the wood. And you know, I'll get maybe 2 Merlin scales out of that, and the rest will be fire steel lumps like this. If I was going to be really anal about it, I would only cut this, and this is what you call rift sawing. It's very difficult to do on a flat table saw, but you can see there'd only be 1 big blank in the middle and 2 similar sized blanks there, because you lose this here because of the size of that. So you get 1 there and 1 there. Okay, so you end up with 1 big one and 2 small ones. Well, that's not going to be much. What I really wanted was 2 big ones, so I'm going to go vadum like that, and get those 2. As you can see, the growth rings are reasonably close to the center, better than nothing. And then I can go that way, and that here is just about big enough. This size here, it's just about big enough for Merlin scale, so I'll be able to get 1, 2, 3. I'll probably get 4 out of that, and then maybe 1 more here, and then I might end up with either next to nothing, depends on the spill I get with the saw blade, and maybe end up with a square sort of section here going through that way, and that'll be maybe 3 ferro rod blanks in there. So I'm trying to take advantage of the way that the growth rings are, the strength of the grain. I'll end up with fairly similar grain on the blanks when they get put on the blade, because obviously this will be on one side of the knife, that'll be on another, and you could see either it goes that way, or if I flip this one up and over, you'll end up with the grain going like that. It all depends, but as I say, if those 2 as a pair, and I'll end up masking taping them 2 together so they stay together, and then when it's come out of the infiltrant, I'll try and match them back up again, but they'll have their little buddy in twos when they go into the stabilization thing. So I'll end up with hopefully 2 big blades, maybe 4 if I'm lucky for Merlins, which will be that sort of size, and then I'll hopefully end up with a square for ferro rods. So a slight insight into the way I cut the wood, the way I do it. But at the end of the day, the trick is, if out of the growth rings, the best piece of wood would be something like that, and that, and then like that, like that, like that, like that, and you start getting extra pieces in that. It's called rift sawing, when you're actually completely cutting like radii. But for efficiency, a good yield from the wood, you end up quarter sawing it, you get 2 that way, and then you can get 2 that way, and then 2 that way, and then maybe 1 that way. That's how it sort of works. Now if I kept going like that, these ain't going to have quite so much strength as if I went that way. Does that make sense? So again, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then have a look at it, have a little way around. Might end up going that way again, or this way. Again, 1, 2, 1, 2. Might end up with 2 Merlins and then a ferro rod. But of course, it's not just drawing a neat line. What you have to take into account is you've got a saw blade. Generally speaking, they got a kerf, which is what you cut into wood, and that is something like 2.8 millimeters, 3 millimeters. What the actual saw blade is removed, and you don't get that back. That's no sawdust. It makes the wood easier to dry. It gets into it. But if you cut this green and then put the planks in, they could warp as it dries. So the wood that I'm getting is already pretty seasoned, so it shouldn't warp to a great degree in my airing cupboard. And then 1 inch a year, so the stuff I cut over the years is gradually working its way through. This piece of cherry at, I don't know, 10-12 mil, in about 6 to 8 months that should be absolutely fine to use. Being that it's been in the wood store at the place I bought it anyway, before I've even put it in the airing cupboard, and then it gets the all night in the temperature controlled oven, doing the final purge at the end of it. So a slight insight into the way I cut wood, the way I cut it. Scott from Wessex Blades out.